Losing can be very discouraging, and being on a losing streak absolutely devastating. In these moments, a lot of thoughts go through our minds, from anger, sadness, self-doubt, or just blaming others and pushing on without taking a break that can be pretty harmful. In this video, I'll try to talk about the topic of being stuck skill-wise, how to handle defeats and losing streaks, but also how to turn around these situations and start learning from them that helped me whenever I was stuck and got me out of a dark mindset and enjoy games more, but also improve at the same time. In my opinion, this topic can be very deep, and there could be hours of discussions about it, so to convey my thoughts better, I created these 3 chapters, dramatically calling them Understanding, Acceptance, and Improving, that I thought would be the 3 most common problems players bump into. A small summary of what to expect. In Understanding, I'll talk about some of the most common reasons a player might lose in general in competitive games, then the concept of blaming your teammates or other external excuses, and how these games' matchmaking function to gently lead everyone to the next chapter, Acceptance, which will be more self-centered, discussing how to battle self-doubt and negative emotions after many losses, or after understanding where you are skill-wise in Splatoon and how to look at it in a way that helps instead of letting it get to you and lose your motivation to play the game. And finally, Improving, where I'll share my methods and thoughts that helped me personally, but I also read about in many competitive games through the years, for the main goal to guide you towards learning and improving, while also staying positive and even enthusiastic about the journey. So in this first chapter, let's talk about some of the most common problems that lead to a losing streak, or some of you getting completely stuck and not improving. The most common mistake that tends to happen at each loss is the iconic blaming some external factor, most commonly your teammates, saying it's impossible to win with a bunch of, quote, idiots. Now, instead of fully dissecting this reason, let's just imagine the scenario. If everyone is saying their team is full of idiots, that means someone is also probably saying the same thing on the opposite team, and potentially everyone is saying this at the same time, meaning everyone is considered an idiot then, including us, and so everyone has something to learn and do better even at the highest levels. The opposite side of this is something I learned a decade ago when I still played League of Legends, where top players used to say in order to make sure you are climbing the ranks, you will have to carry and stop relying on your team, and in order to do so, there is no room for mistake, since your team will make them instead of you, and so each time you make a mistake, it's also your fault you lost. I would leave it at this for now, since the argument is really a dead end, and if you find yourself blaming your teammates a lot, you need to look deeper. Another reason why a lot of losses or even losing streak happen are a lot more outside the game in a sense. For example, most humans hate losing, that's a fact. It's part of our evolution, it's a form of self-defense to keep us try better. The unfortunate side effect is that it also gets us angry in the moment, or tilt or rage as they say, and it affects our abilities to play the game properly. This might sound very patronizing, I know, since I felt the same when I first heard it, but when you are angry you are playing worse and you're making more mistakes. It's very invisible and you don't really notice it, but it massively decreases your ability to think straight and make good decisions, causing even more losses, and then it's a vicious cycle that keeps on repeating itself to a 10 losses streak, and I'm sure we all had that at some point. Think of a bad argument you had with a loved one where you felt much better just after 10 minutes of taking a break, where it already felt so insignificant what you were arguing about to the point that it looks silly. The same thing also applies to your decisions in a video game. Taking a break after a loss or two will clear your mind even if you don't feel like you need it, and your next game will be that much better than if you went straight into it. Of course, a follow-up to this one is to also try to stop playing when you feel tired or stressed or just generally angry, since these all affect the way you play and can potentially make you learn bad habits during these playtimes that are much harder to correct later, since they can become muscle memory. That's the main reason really that almost all sources say that take breaks or stop playing when you don't feel 100%, because each minute you play in that form contributes to your muscle memories on how you unconsciously play the game, and to undo that you have to try a lot harder than when you first start out. It's like an addiction, it's much harder to stop than to not try it in the first place. For the final part of understanding, I'd like to talk about matchmaking in general and losing in video games. Losing is always considered as a punishment for players that keeps you away from ranking up, and is looked at as a rather bad thing. Of course, we don't like losing. Ranks are often looked at as an achievement or bragging rights instead of what they are, a barrier to make sure you play fair matches. The way matchmaking and ranking modes in video games are designed is not to punish you or keep you from having fun, but quite the opposite in fact. The main goal of every game is to measure how well you play and put you in a rank according to that skill, and as you improve or it feels like you need to learn something more, it adjusts your placement in order to ensure that you can have fun and not play in a rank that is too easy for you, but also not in a rank where you have no chance against your opponents. While by no means are these systems 100% accurate, they work pretty well overall, as proven by countless guides and analytics predicting how players of different ranks play. While Splatoon 3's ranking system is a bit weird because you can go into the negatives with your rank point, it still has a hidden rating that matches you with people who are around your score from different ranks even, and your rank ladder is basically just an achievement. So as conclusion, instead of getting angry or sad over losing, think of it as a sign or lesson that there is something you could do better and learn, as there is something vital to the game you are not doing correctly. And so in fact, each loss you suffer is actually the best way to improve, since losing will show you far more of your weaknesses than winning. As one of my favorite StarCraft professional player Whiterua used to say, more GG, more skill. Keep playing and losing and reflect each time what you could do better, and you will see improvement. Now that we know it's pointless to blame our teammates or other external factors, and that playing while you're angry, tired, or just overall not in a good mood is a bad idea, and that also the matchmaking is not your enemy but rather your ally, we are ready to proceed into the next chapter, acceptance. The next phase I had to go through at this point is fighting my own negative thoughts of self-doubt and demotivation, since after accepting that all these other things were just excuses, you do get to a dead end that it is you who should still improve, and most importantly, the only thing you have power over. This is also quite a big problem because it's not an easy thing to accept, to truly accept, not just say that you want to get better or you are not playing on the level you thought you were. It's immediately demotivating and discouraging, especially if you don't know where to start, and this is in my opinion the most common stage where we quit or just give up. This is why calling other players bad or even yourself bad is such a terrible habit online communities develop, since what is even good or bad? There are only ranks and skill levels of playing games, and it is your goal that matters to which you should compare yourself. Making someone or yourself feel bad about their own gameplay is detrimental to the whole process of improving, since it's demotivating and contribute to giving up. It is also very easy to fall back into phase 1 from here, of blaming things on others after a little bit of improvement that gets to your head and you can just start all over, which is dangerous as you get to the giving up part more than once that way. There isn't a magic word or technique that can help you at this stage, as it's probably the hardest, but there are a few words that might help or examples that can show you it's not as bad as it looks. First of all, give yourself some slack, okay? I'm not going to say it's just a video game. We obviously take it seriously and it has its nuances, so saying that would be disrespectful and hypocritical from me really. But evaluate where you are, whether it's B rank, C rank, or A, and tell yourself, and if it helps, tell yourself aloud. It actually does help me in moments of stress in my private life to say things out loud to affect me subconsciously. But tell yourself it's fine to do mistakes and there's a long road ahead of you where you can learn, and that you won't be an S+50 player overnight. It means you have a long road of fun ahead and where you will learn new things, exciting things that you didn't know about before, and the first time you'll do them yourself in your games, it's going to feel so good. Other times you'll experiment, you will also have some terrible losses, but just remember it's a loss in order to learn or practice something that you know will help. Sometimes you have to demolish a castle and start building from its foundations again, or whatever the actual proverb is. This especially applies in the cases where someone is trying a new weapon or still looks for their main weapon to use. Remember that every time you switch your weapon to something else than what you usually use, you're basically starting from scratch, as those muscle memories you are not conscious of are used to a completely different weapon and its perks from fire rate to accuracy and range, etc. And you will play worse. Whenever I get asked about how do people play this much better at a higher rank or what should they do to improve fast, I try to tell the same example that I think fits really well here. Think of video games just like going to the gym or running or whatever experience in your life that required continuous training, which can be pretty difficult because games are just looked at as entertainment. But that doesn't mean they're easy. This is in fact why most video games have a difficulty slider in order to let players skip the training part and start to have fun sooner, which is great when you don't have a lot of spare time. Either way, remember the time when you did your first push-up, or maybe your unhealthiest moment in life when you first started to turn it around? That first push-up where the first 5 probably felt like the hardest and most embarrassing thing to do ever, and you were happy to end it right away. But after you prevailed and you kept doing it for weeks, you start to find it easier to do 5, then 10, then 20, and so on, and looking back at the first 5 feels like a joke. Video games and Splatoon are the same. The first time you pick up a gun, it's hard to aim with. The first time dodging a Tento missile seems impossible, or knowing when to move ahead or retreat seems like a random pick, but it's all a matter of time and practice. These are things that are often referred to as muscle memory that you need to train yourself and your gaming habits to get used to something by doing it every day, and after weeks to months you will see guaranteed improvements if you're doing them correctly, as your body gets used to it and it will be second nature, just like you know which shelf the spoons are at. Understanding it is only you that you have control over, and accepting that there is still much you can learn is not only a humbling experience, but is the first step in order to start the training of weeks to months to see improvements. And so we arrive to chapter 3, improving. So now I'm way past blaming it on excuses on why I lose, and I have accepted that I have a lot to learn and also that it will take some time. So what's next? How to improve is not an easy topic, and there are entire channels dedicated to talking about topics for years, so squeezing it into 2 minutes isn't really an option. But the good news is that reaching this point with your mentality is already a huge step and will greatly help along the way. Still, there are a few tips, fortunately, to set you on the right path for starters that are not targeted but rather general tips that will help on all levels of skill. The most basic and underestimated step to get better is your posture, assuming you play with motion controls, which you should unless there is a very good reason not to. This is different for everyone, but in general, my usual slouching style of sitting does not work for Splatoon. It heavily limits the way I can move my hands and wrists the way I use motion controls. To give you an example of what I mean, I normally do rest my arms on the chair when I play with controllers, but with Splatoon I simply must not do that as it limits my turning using motion controls, and the moment I stopped using my armrest, it helped a lot. It is important to actually take your time and figure out the best and at the same time healthy posture to use your motion controls with that is not limiting your movement, since this is the most basic feature of Splatoon, and building muscle memory on bad foundations will ruin your complete journey in improving your aim and your movement. I think SRB2 Dude has a fantastic video about this too if I remember right, saying that a simple change of how you're sitting can completely change the way how motion controls feel and can massively improve your aim. And I think there was even a competitive player tweeting something like that recently. I wish I had saved the tweet. The next tip I would recommend is finally choosing one main weapon you keep training with. If you don't want to take Splatoon that seriously, it's fine, but it's still important to give yourself a good training schedule by allowing your muscles to get used to a style of playing, which is normally done by choosing a main weapon or a set of weapons that play similarly. Playing with a single weapon will speed up the process of improving your reactions, aiming, and movement all across the game, since the way your character acts will finally be the same every time. When you were switching weapons every game, you were basically scrambling up your own muscle memory constantly, since your body had no chance to get used to a single range or fire rate of a weapon. And Splatoon 3 is such a fast-paced game that there is no time to correct or change the way you aim in action. It needs to be a precise reaction or you will get splatted, which is why muscle memory is so important. That's the only way to achieve that. Think of it as if you played a splatter shot the most and then you swap to an arrow spray. In a moment of panic or sudden event, you'll likely react as if you were still using a splatter shot, in which case you will be out of range and position and get splatted simply because you were using another gun. Next, possibly the biggest difference between lower ranking and higher ranking players is playing consciously. I already said that there are a lot of moments when there isn't really time to think, but you have to rely on your muscle memories. But there are steps to get to that point first. Most lower ranking players play games with the mindset that let's do this and we'll see how it goes, having absolutely no game plan, and instead they rely on their instincts since that's often recommended, right? The top players play instinctively and that will guide you. The problem with that advice is that it's often not said that those instincts of competitive players are a result of hundreds or even thousands of hours of planning and actively thinking of every scenario possible of what they should be doing logically, on which they build their muscle memories on. Now, following your instincts while you're still new is pretty useless because your instincts are likely incorrect, and you're just further digging a hole it's harder to climb out of. This is quite a paradox because I said there is no time to think most cases in Splatoon, but also that you should start thinking instead of playing instinctively. Fortunately, the lower rank you are, the easier it is to do this in action since the game is slower paced and also leave a lot of room for correction for both teams. But on higher ranks, this is where training and planning outside of playing comes into play. The goal is to start thinking on why you're doing something, or if it is a good thing to do that in the first place. Can you even answer a question why you do something in the game? Often the answers to these never asked questions will actually reveal mistakes or new ideas on what you could do instead. Splatoon is so fast paced that we can easily enter some kind of trance where you keep swimming and shooting left and right and forget to play logically and start doing a bunch of dummy moves that make no sense. A good example happens a lot in turf wars when one team is dominating and they leave the middle of the map behind in order to spawn camp the other team. Forget to paint their turf, but also leave the high ground and the better position just to pursue getting more splats that they would get anyway, but then they get pushed back and lose in the last 30 seconds. The best way of improving your conscious play is something that's easiest to do now in Splatoon 3, which is to rewatch your own replays. Now I know this sounds boring as hell, you want to play, not watch your own losses like some kind of punishment, but watching your own replays can not only be super useful, but after you actually start realizing how much you learned from it, it can get very fun and addicting even. It gets a lot easier to reflect on your own decisions, and you can even pause the game and deduct if something you did was the right or wrong move, and most importantly, in the next match you can try out something different that you thought of and see how that works instead. Over many courses of this, you will start to see success in some of your ideas and failures in others, but instead of leaving it to chance, now you're consciously choosing how to play, and by repeating successful tactics, you will start developing correct muscle memory that now you can instinctively follow. This especially is something that is recommended for every single rank, since as you improve you'll notice that some of your habits that worked in B rank and then A rank will not be so successful in S rank and so on, and you will have to rethink your approach to certain situations that can take time, but also mental strength or humility to accept something you learned before might have to be relearned with a different approach. And this is where I would recommend resources such as watching top players or Twitch or YouTube or even tournaments to compare your playstyle and reactions to them and see how they handle situations or follow their advices, so you can skip the part of having to relearn bad habits that worked for a while and instead learn something that will last longer, since remember, even top players change their strategies constantly, which is what makes them top players, adapting to the evolving flow of a game. Today we have more resources than ever to improve at anything in life, and so you don't have to spend dozens of hours reinventing the wheel yourself. All you have to do is find the correct resources online that already smart people have figured out and spent the time on, and make use of them. These would be my 3 most important quick tips that I think everyone can use to see a huge improvement in their games. But for specific advice and training, I cannot recommend enough for you to check out Squid School YouTube channel, as they have already made at least 100 videos on how to improve at different stages of Splatoon. And Gem is a fantastic teacher who can also convey these tips and lessons in a feasible and fun way. But that is a wrap for this already pretty long video, but I hope telling my experience and mindset also helps others and will help you look at training yourself in a brighter light rather than something demotivating. I truly think the first step in improving and overcoming these difficulties is first in your mind and battling your own self. But once that is achieved, the doors just open to whole new heights to reach. As always, if anyone has some tips or advice they would like to share with their fellow Splatoon players, leave them in the comments, or if you feel you're struggling at something, also feel free to ask for advice and maybe someone can help. You never know. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, like and subscribe to support the future of this channel. Take care everyone, and bye-bye.